Patrick Mahomes made a surprising announcement just hours before Travis Kelce married Taylor Swift, and it quickly became one of the biggest talking points of the wedding weekend. According to reports, what Mahomes revealed caught Travis completely off guard. But what happened next surprised everyone even more. Let's get into it. Let's set the scene. It's the first weekend of July, and Madison Square Garden has been turned into the most guarded building in New York City. A permit was filed to close surrounding streets from July 2 through midday July 4 for an event on July 3. Swifties are camping outside in the heat. Black SUVs are rolling through curtained-off streets. Everyone in America knows what's happening inside. Travis Kelce is marrying Taylor Swift. And right in the middle of that lead-up, Patrick Mahomes sat down for a GQ profile. The interviewer asked him a simple question. Which teammate would he actually want on vacation with him? Everyone assumed the answer was automatic. Kelce and Mahomes have spent a decade being inseparable, on the field, off the field, at award shows, at each other's houses. Many people assumed he would automatically choose his longtime tight end. Instead, he explicitly stated that Travis Kelce is simply getting too old. He selected a speedy young wide receiver for future summer trips instead. He didn't dance around it either. Mahomes said the easy answer was obviously Travis, but explained he was now leaning toward one of the younger guys because of Kelce's age. He landed on Xavier Worthy, saying Worthy's speed and energy made him the new pick, and even mentioned his own kids liked watching Worthy play because he's so fast on the field. Think about the timing here. This wasn't some random off-season quote dropped in March. The highly anticipated rehearsal dinner took place at Madison Square Garden. However, an unexpected interview generated major headlines right before the festivities. A close friend delivered a shocking public insult to the famous groom. Kelce was hours from getting married, and his own best friend in football was out here saying he's aged out of the friend group's vacation rotation. Now, if you know these two, you know this isn't new territory. Trading jabs has basically been the currency of their friendship for years. Taking shots at each other has been a theme of their friendship. The tight end previously mocked his quarterback's unique speaking voice online. So on the surface, it reads like classic Mahomes-Kelce ribbing, the kind of thing teammates do to keep each other humble. But context matters. Kelce is 36 years old, coming off a decision that already had people questioning how much longer he'd play. He'd just been handed a new deal to stick around Kansas City, and now, on the single biggest week of his personal life, his quarterback was publicly needling him about being past his prime. Not on the football field, but as a travel companion, which stings in its own particular way, because it's not about routes or blocking. It's about who Mahomes wants around him when the cameras aren't on. Kelce hadn't responded publicly by the time the wedding weekend kicked into gear, but those close to the situation described him as caught off guard, not devastated, not furious, but genuinely thrown that this was the headline circulating as he was trying to focus on marrying Taylor Swift. He had a rehearsal dinner to get through. He had vows to finalize. And instead, half of Kansas City Chiefs Twitter was arguing about whether Xavier Worthy had replaced him in Mahomes' friend group. That's the moment we're starting from. A wedding that the entire world was watching, and a quarterback who used the loudest possible microphone, GQ, days before the ceremony, to say the one thing you don't expect to hear about the groom. Not a toast, not a tribute, a joke that questioned whether Kelce still belonged in his inner circle. To understand why this landed the way it did, you have to understand what Mahomes and Kelce actually are to each other. Because this wasn't two strangers. This was arguably the tightest quarterback-tight end pairing in modern NFL history, about to be tested by a joke that hit closer to home than anyone expected. Before there was a Taylor Swift wedding, before there was a GQ headline, there was just two football players in Kansas City who happened to become the best combination the league had seen in years. Mahomes and Kelce didn't start as best friends. They became that way because of proximity, wins, and an absurd amount of time spent in each other's company. For over a decade, Kelce has spent his entire career in Kansas City, and Mahomes has been the guy throwing him the ball for the majority of it. Kelce, at age 36, made the decision not to retire, and instead signed a new 3-year contract with the Chiefs, bringing him back for what will be his 14th NFL season, all of which he has spent in Kansas City. That's not a stat line. That's a marriage of its own. One quarterback, one tight end, one city, one franchise for the entirety of Kelce's career. Along the way, their circle expanded to include their families. Mahomes' wife, Brittany, became close with Taylor Swift almost as soon as Swift entered the picture. Swift and Mahomes' friendship first blossomed in the summer of 2023, shortly after Swift's relationship with Kelce went public. By October, sources were confirming their best friend status. A source described the bond forming quickly, noting that Brittany was thrilled to be building something real with Taylor, and that the two had grown close in a short window of time. That closeness showed up constantly at Chiefs games. Taylor Swift and Brittany Mahomes look on during a game between the Los Angeles Chargers and Kansas City Chiefs at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium on October 22, 2023 in Kansas City, Missouri. It became a familiar image, Brittany and Taylor in the suite together, cheering on their husbands, while the two men who actually built the friendship in the first place were down on the field, doing the thing that brought everyone together in this first place. This wasn't just a football friendship either. Mahomes was there for the biggest moment of Kelce's personal life outside the wedding itself, the engagement. When Kelce got down on one knee back in August of last year, the first calls that went out weren't to reporters or publicists. His wife was one of the first calls Swift and Kelce made after he proposed to Swift in August 2025. Mahomes wasn't even the one who picked up. They called me after the podcast was done. Mahomes told reporters during a press conference that month. They didn't call me, they called Brittany, and I was in the back of the FaceTime. That detail tells you something about the hierarchy of this friend group. Even Mahomes, the three-time Super Bowl champion and probably the most famous athlete in America right now, was the guy standing in the background of a FaceTime call, watching his wife get the big news first. He wasn't offended by it. If anything, he leaned into how much this whole relationship meant to him. He talked about watching Taylor build her career up close through Brittany and Travis, describing it as genuinely cool to witness from that kind of proximity. So when people were shocked by the GQ comments dropped days before the wedding, part of the shock came from exactly this history. This is a guy who was in the room, or at least in the FaceTime, for the proposal. This is a guy whose wife has been best friends with the bride for years. This is not some distant teammate taking a cheap shot at a guy he barely knows. This is Mahomes talking about Kelce the same week he's supposed to be standing next to him, celebrating one of the biggest days of his life. And that's exactly why the too old comment cut differently than typical locker room trash talk. If a rookie had said it, nobody blinks. But when the guy who shared a decade of championships, family vacations, and inside jokes with Kelce turns around and publicly floats Xavier Worthy as the new travel partner, it reads less like a joke and more like a signal, intentional or not, about where things stand. Worthy, for his part, has become exactly the kind of teammate Mahomes described. Young, fast, and constantly around the quarterback both on and off the field. He's the new energy in the receiving room, the guy who's quickly becoming a fixture in Mahomes' day-to-day life, the way Kelce was for years. Whether Mahomes meant it as pure comedy or as something with a little more truth behind it, the optics were impossible to ignore. An established legend being publicly nudged aside for the next guy up, right as that established legend prepared to get married in front of 1,000 of the most famous people on the planet. It's worth remembering, too, that none of this happened in a vacuum. The Chiefs organization itself was fully wrapped up in wedding mode that week. Numerous current and former Chiefs players were in attendance, including head coach Andy Reid and his wife Tammy Reid, Chiefs owner Clark Hunt and his wife Tavia Hunt, along with their eldest daughter Gracie Hunt, and son Noble Hunt were invited to the big day. So this wasn't just Mahomes and Kelce's private business. It was an organization-wide moment, with front office executives and coaching staff all flying to New York for the same 3 days. Mahomes chose to make his comments about Kelce's declining vacation status. Andy Reid himself had been fielding questions about the invite for weeks leading up to it, joking on a radio appearance that he'd only be attending if his tuxedo still fit. That's the kind of goodwill and warmth that surrounded this entire week. Coaches cracking jokes about tuxedos, teammates flying in from across the league, an organization treating Kelce's wedding like a genuine family event, which makes Mahomes' comments stand out even more. Everyone else was showing up in celebration mode. Mahomes showed up with a punchline that put his closest friend on notice, right as that friend prepared to marry the biggest pop star on the planet. By the time Friday arrived, none of the noise around Mahomes' comments mattered as much as the spectacle building outside Madison Square Garden. This was, by any measure, the wedding of the decade, and it very nearly buried the story of Mahomes' jab entirely under the sheer scale of what was happening. The couple had been engaged for almost a year. Kelce proposed at his home in Leawood, Kansas, after they finished recording an episode of his sports podcast, New Heights, in which Swift announced her 12th studio album. From that moment on, speculation about where and when they'd actually get married consumed entertainment media for months. Early guesses had them marrying at Swift's Rhode Island property. Early reports suggested that Taylor and Travis may tie the knot at her 8-bedroom home in Rhode Island, known locally as Harkness House. The singer purchased the mansion back in 2013. A local senator even confirmed the location wasn't happening, joking that Swift had given the state a pass for her big day. Instead, all signs pointed toward Madison Square Garden, the arena where Swift has performed to sold-out crowds throughout her career. The New York Times reported that Winnick Productions, a company that produces major red carpet events at the arena, filed a street activity permit with the city. Permits, catering trucks, and construction crews all but confirmed it before the couple said a word publicly. And when the day came, it delivered on every ounce of hype. Many A-list celebrities flocked to the Big Apple for the occasion of the summer, and after weeks of multiple reports, rumors, and construction, the stars were dripped out in their finest dresses and tuxedos for what might be the wedding of the year, or decade, or century. Guests included NFL names like Justin Thomas, Baker Mayfield, Cooper Kupp, and Kareem Hunt, alongside entertainment royalty from Ed Sheeran and Zoe Kravitz to Jimmy Fallon and Jay-Z. Outside the arena, fans had been camped for hours in rising temperatures, watching black SUVs with tinted windows disappear behind a curtained entrance. Nobody could see inside. Swifties stood outside MSG for hours amid rising temperatures, as black SUVs with tinted windows carrying guests made their way into the curtained-off arena. The secrecy only heightened the anticipation. This wasn't a wedding anyone was going to get details on until the couple decided to release them. Then, late into the night, the signal came. As the night went on, tired fans suddenly saw pink lights flash. Justin married signs surrounding Madison Square Garden read. Almost on cue, rain started falling right as the official confirmation went out. A news release confirming the nuptials was sent out as rain started pouring, and a sense of calm enveloped the area. The ceremony itself was officiated by a longtime friend of the couple. To officiate their wedding, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce pulled in. Comedian and actor Adam Sandler, a longtime friend who has previously gushed over the pair's relationship. There was no traditional wedding party. Swift and Kelce opted to forego traditional bridesmaids or groomsmen. Instead, Austin Swift, her brother, and Jason Kelce, his brother, served as man of honor and best man, respectively, and stood alongside the couple at the altar. Details trickled out from guests in the days after. George Stephanopoulos, who attended, described the vows as everything you'd hope for, real, vulnerable, both serious and silly, and deeply loving, adding that he never expected a wedding at Madison Square Garden could feel so intimate. Even the AMC CEO, who'd been given a rare look inside before it was locked down, marveled that the arena didn't even look like itself anymore. The couple used the week to make a statement well beyond their own vows. A representative for the couple confirmed that they donated a staggering $26 million this week to more than 20 organizations across the nation. The donations focused heavily on feeding communities, youth education, music programs, children's hospitals, and animal welfare. It was a moment clearly designed to redirect at least some of the attention away from spectacle and towards substance. But even with all of that, the vows, the charity, the celebrity procession leaving the building well past midnight, with Tom Brady, Selena Gomez, Bradley Cooper, and Gigi Hadid among those spotted departing, the Mahomes comment kept resurfacing in conversation. Fans and reporters kept circling back to it, wondering how it would play out. Once Mahomes and Kelce were actually standing in the same room, dressed up, cameras mostly blocked, celebrating the very friendship that had just been publicly needled days earlier. Mahomes himself had been in the city since before the ceremony. Mahomes, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs and friend of Kelce, who was previously spotted in New York on July 2, posted a picture of him and his wife, Brittany, on his Instagram story on July 3. He'd been photographed dining with other Chiefs-connected families in the days leading into the ceremony, seemingly in good spirits, joking around, giving no public indication that his GQ comments had created any real tension. That's part of what made the whole situation so strange to watch unfold. On one hand, you had Mahomes acting completely normal in the lead-up. No apology, no clarification, no walking it back. On the other, you had a groom who was reportedly caught off guard by the timing, trying to enjoy his own wedding week while a headline about his football future, or at least his vacation future, followed him into the biggest weekend of his life. So how did Kelce handle it? Because here's the thing about Travis Kelce. He doesn't usually let things like this sit quietly. He spent years building a reputation as someone who claps back, whether it's on his podcast, in interviews, or directly to whoever said the thing in the first place. In the immediate aftermath of the GQ comments, Kelce didn't fire off a public statement. He was, after all, in the middle of finalizing a wedding that had already consumed months of his life and required an unprecedented level of security and secrecy. The couple had required guests to sign strict non-disclosure agreements before receiving confidential details, a measure that reflects both the scale and the security concerns involved. Every hour of his week was accounted for. A rehearsal dinner, a ceremony, a reception running from early evening into the small hours of the morning. There wasn't exactly a natural moment to sit down and craft a response to a magazine quote about beach vacations. But people close to the situation noted his initial reaction wasn't anger. It was surprise, genuine, caught-off-guard surprise, that his own quarterback chose that specific week, with that specific platform, to publicly suggest he'd aged out of a friend group he'd essentially built. Kelce has never been shy about his age becoming a storyline. It's been a subplot of his entire final NFL stretch, especially once he chose to sign that new deal rather than walk away. Hearing it framed as a joke, from Mahomes specifically, during his own wedding week, hit differently than the usual outside chatter about his career winding down. It's also worth remembering that this dynamic between Mahomes and Kelce cuts both ways. This is a friendship built on exactly this kind of back and forth. Taking shots at each other has been a theme of their friendship. The tight end previously mocked his quarterback's unique speaking voice online. Kelce has thrown plenty of jabs Mahomes' way over the years about his voice, his mannerisms, his fashion choices. So there's a reasonable argument that Mahomes' comment wasn't really a betrayal at all, but simply him returning the favor in the loudest possible venue, at the loudest possible moment, because that's exactly the kind of chaos these two have always thrived on. Still, timing changes everything. A joke landing in a random February interview reads as banter. A joke landing 3 days before a wedding in a national magazine, framed around whether you're still worth including in vacation plans. That reads like something else entirely, at least until you actually see how it plays out in person. And in person is where the real story lived. Multiple accounts from inside the wedding week describe Mahomes and Kelce interacting exactly as they always have, laughing, taking pictures, standing shoulder to shoulder for parts of the celebration. Whatever tension existed in headlines didn't seem to translate into anything visible once they were actually face to face. If Kelce was upset, he didn't let it show at his own wedding. And if Mahomes intended any real shade, he didn't repeat it or expand on it once the cameras were actually pointed at both of them together. That's often how these moments go with this specific friend group. The public gets a headline, builds a narrative around tension, and then the two people at the center of it show up completely unbothered, because the relationship underneath the headline was never actually in danger. Mahomes wasn't distancing himself from Kelce. If anything, flying to New York, attending the bachelor party beforehand, and showing up for the full 3 days of celebration says the opposite. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who attended Kelce's bachelor party, and his wife, Brittany Mahomes, somehow avoided the cameras. That's not the behavior of someone actually replacing his best friend with a rookie receiver. That's the behavior of someone who knows exactly how close the friendship still is, and felt comfortable enough to joke about it publicly without any real risk of damaging it. Kelce's side of the story, once photos started surfacing, told a similar tale. Mahomes eventually posted from the event himself, days after the ceremony. The three-time Super Bowl champion shared multiple photos from Swift and Kelce's wedding festivities on Friday. He simply captioned the post with a white heart emoji. No further explanation, no reference to the GQ comments, nothing that read as him trying to smooth things over publicly, just a quiet, affectionate acknowledgement of the night, shared once the dust had settled and both families were back home. There was no viral clapback video, no follow-up interview where Kelce addressed it directly, which in its own way tells you something. If this had actually fractured something between them, you'd expect at least a version of Kelce addressing it on his own podcast, where he and his brother Jason have never held back on much of anything. Instead, silence, the kind of silence that suggests the whole thing was processed privately, laughed off between two guys who've said far worse to each other over the years, and left there. What the moment really exposed wasn't a rift. It was just how much attention, gets paid to literally everything either of these guys says in public, especially during a week when the entire world's cameras were pointed at Kelce specifically. Say the exact same line about Xavier Worthy in March, buried in some unrelated podcast episode, and nobody notices. Say it 3 days before the most watched wedding of the year, and it becomes a headline everyone's dissecting for hidden meaning. So where does all of this leave things now that the wedding's come and gone? The guests have flown home, and the world's moved on from parsing a GQ quote about beach trips. Kelce is still married. He's still Mahomes' teammate. And by every visible account, the two are still exactly what they've been for over a decade. The closest thing to family that two football players outside of blood relation can become. The wedding itself only reinforced that. Kelce didn't pick some celebrity friend or business partner to stand beside him at the altar. He picked his brother, Jason, keeping the moment rooted in family rather than spectacle. Austin Swift, her brother, and Jason Kelce, his brother, served as man of honor and best man respectively, and stood alongside the couple at the altar. Mahomes wasn't in that formal role, but he didn't need to be. He was there for the bachelor party, there for the ceremony, there for the reception that ran deep into the night. What the whole episode really did was reveal something about fame at this level. How a single line in an interview, said by someone that close to the center of a story this big, can spin into its own news cycle within hours, regardless of whether it was ever meant to carry any real weight. Mahomes wasn't trying to signal the end of a friendship. He was doing what he and Kelce have always done to each other. At the exact moment the entire planet happened to be watching Kelce's every move. There's also a football reality sitting underneath all of this that's worth acknowledging. Kelce chose not to retire. Kelce, at age 36, made the decision not to retire, and instead signed a new 3-year contract with the Chiefs, bringing him back for what will be his 14th NFL season, all of which he has spent in Kansas City. That decision alone kept the "how much longer does he have" conversation alive. Well before Mahomes ever opened his mouth to GQ, age has been the backdrop of Kelce's entire final chapter, and Mahomes' comment, whether intentional or not, tapped directly into a storyline that was already following Kelce into his wedding week regardless of what anyone said about vacations. And Xavier Worthy, the name at the center of the actual quote, has said nothing publicly about being cast as the heir apparent to Kelce's role in Mahomes' personal life. He's focused on football, on building chemistry with Mahomes on the field, the way Kelce spent over a decade doing. If there's a changing of the guard happening at all, it's happening slowly, on the practice field. Not in a magazine quote about who gets invited on a beach trip. As for Kelce and Swift, their story moves into a new chapter entirely separate from any of this. They're husband and wife now, with a season ahead that will put both of their public lives under a different kind of scrutiny. Kelce back on the field for a 14th year, Swift presumably back in the stands next to Brittany Mahomes, exactly where she sat for years. Taylor Swift and Brittany Mahomes look on during a game between the Los Angeles Chargers and Kansas City Chiefs at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium on October 22, 2023 in Kansas City, Missouri. That image, more than any headline about vacation preferences, is probably the truest picture of where these two families actually stand with each other. What lingers from all of this isn't some grudge or fracture. It's the reminder of just how loud even the smallest comment becomes, once it's attached to two of the most watched people in the country during the single most watched week of their year. Mahomes said something he's probably said in some form a dozen times before, in 100 different casual conversations nobody wrote about. This time, it landed 3 days before a wedding at Madison Square Garden, and it turned an offhand joke about golf trips into a story that outlasted the ceremony itself. Kelce, for his part, walked away from the week married, surrounded by family, having just watched his organization's coaches, his teammates, and his closest friends all fly across the country to stand beside him. Whatever surprise he felt reading that quote days before his wedding, it clearly didn't stop him from sharing a bachelor party, a rehearsal dinner, and a reception with the same guy who wrote it. Sometimes that's just what these friendships look like from the outside. Loud, messy, occasionally embarrassing in public, and somehow still standing exactly where it's always been, once the noise